flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This morning, we're going to open with a reading of a verse, Jeremiah 29, verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to protect you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and give you a future. So, Father, as we come to you today, we just thank you for this, the blessings you've sent to us. As a county, we give you thanks for continued prosperity. We give you thanks for protecting our citizens. And today, Father, as we join in our county commission meeting, we just ask for your guidance. Father, and we also come before you and ask for rain for this area. We give you thanks for all that today in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, good morning, all. We welcome you to the meeting today. Two main topics we have in front of us for those in the public is the primary canvas report and our audit proposal from the accountants. I have nothing particular on my mind, so I'll move right into the agendas. Do I have approval for the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, we need to add one item that we deferred from a previous meeting, and I believe everybody got the handout that was in our last meeting packet. It's with regard to a request to waive the rules and regs for 3360 North 8th Street. And I would ask that we put that on the agenda right after our canvas at 8:30 to talk about that waiver. So an amendment to the agenda. And with that amendment, if that's acceptable, I would move that we approve the amended agenda.
I'll second that too.
And it's moved and seconded that we approve the amended agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consent agenda. What is your pleasure there, gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, this is Lon. I would move that we approve items on the consent agenda.
Clifford, second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried. Public comment. Anybody in the room or have any comment or observation they would like to share that is not related to the agenda? Okay, thank you very much. Now we are ready to move right into the canvas. Dory, the election.
All right, so in front of you, you each have a final report for the election. I've also included the full reports if you would like to look at those. In addition to that, I provided you with some statistics from the election. So between election day and today, what we did was we counted additional mail ballots that came in. We counted the provisional ballots that you approved last week. And then we also entered any hand-counted ballots that were required because of a damaged ballot or marks that were unable to be read. So that's the difference between election night and what you're seeing today. We did have a total of 900 early voters. 34 of those were provisional ballots. So that was up quite a bit from prior years. Had a good turnout. Overall turnout, I believe, came out at 24%, just over 24%, which is really good compared to prior years for primary. For mail ballots, we sent out 457 mail ballots, and we had 85% of those returned. So that was 387 returned, which was also, we've not had over 100 in the last two primary elections, and so getting back 340 or 387 is a big jump. I also want to direct your attention to the audit results. those are required that you review prior to certifying the election results. The audit this year, because it's an even numbered election, we were required to audit 3 races, 1 national race, 1 state race, and 1 county race. So the Secretary of State's office is the one that ordered which races would be audited. For those, we had the Democratic U.S. Representative for District 1, the Kansas Senate District 39 Republican, and the Register of Deeds race Republican. Once they ordered us which races we would be auditing, we then had to figure out which precinct results we were going to audit, and we did that by drawing a random number, which turned out to be Ward 15-123-1. And so that is the precinct that we audited in relation to each of these races. We had a team of 4 sit on that audit board. There are 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And basically what they do is they hand count all of the ballots for those races for that precinct. So they got all 3 of those races done in just a couple of hours. So, you know, they were a little more, they're a little more nimble this year in changing their process if something wasn't working out quite right. So, but they got that all done. They had 1 person who took turns reading the results on the ballot and the other 3 tallied. And I do have those documents here if you were interested in reviewing them. But basically, all the results were spot on for those 3 races for that precinct. So those were submitted to the Secretary of State's office, and the Secretary of State then released and approved for you to move forward with canvass based on those results.
Any questions for Dory? Lauren?
Mr. Chairman, this is Lon, and mine's more just a general question before we approve the results. But any hitches or anything that we need to be concerned about going forward into November and future elections with regard to mail-ins or advance voting or voting machine or any concerns, or did things go as smoothly as you thought they would? What would be your overall assessment of this election as we head into November?
So I think things went well this year. This was the first time we had an early board, and I think that they really helped by being out there and receiving voters during the early voting period here in our office. That allowed my staff to stay back and focus on the election prep work, so which is always about double in a primary election. So that was helpful. I would expect to continue to have that early board come in November. I do expect increased turnout in November, even more than what we had here for the primary. So always concerned about that. We've got a lot of people that said they wanted to come back and be election workers. I know as we get closer to November and we see what COVID does or doesn't do, that may change. So we are continuing to recruit and build up our list for November. No specific concerns. If we have, these mail ballots were hard to process this time, simply because it was a primary and we had a lot of unaffiliated voters. When those unaffiliated voters, you know, turn in a mail ballot application and they have chosen a party but they haven't affiliated with that party, we have to chase them down and get them to fill out the necessary paperwork to affiliate. And so there was a lot of chasing people this year, which took up a lot of time during this election. So we don't expect that in November. However, processing this number of mail ballots could be a challenge, even if it's doubled. So.
And then my follow-up question, I know there were changes at the poll with the plexiglass, with the check-in at the fairgrounds where I vote and so forth. And it seemed like you told us one time that you were able to do this with a few less poll workers, if I recall. So give us that side of the assessment at the polls themselves, and you know, the adaptation to the situation.
So in prior years, and I started this actually last year, but in prior years, they hired a 3-person board for each precinct. So at a location like the fairgrounds, that was 3 people times, you know, a dozen or more precincts. that we would have in there processing voters. Some of the tables were really busy, some of them not so busy. So what I did was at all of our locations is we have a single check-in point. It doesn't matter what your precinct is, if you're in the right location, there's one table where you check in. You either at that table get your touchscreen ballot card, or you get a receipt where you can go to the next stop and pick up your ballot. You pick up your ballot, you go to the voting booths, and so we've just kind of to improve the flow as it goes through each of those locations. And that requires fewer workers because we don't have to have, 36 people for 12 precincts. We might, need 24 to manage those locations. We had a vendor back out at the last minute, lose a pallet of plexiglass barriers, and so Rex jumped up and built some of those frames that you saw over the tables. And those were temporary, using plastic, but he's already started to redo those with actual plexiglass, and those would be available to use for any events.
Just a quick observation at the fairgrounds, I thought it went very smooth. I was in there early, so I don't know what it was like, later in the day, but from a voter perspective, I thought it went smoothly.
I have heard from both voters and election workers that say they like the new setup, they like the new flow, how it goes. So we'll continue to do that and continue to find efficiencies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other observations?
Dory, when do you start anticipating requests for November ballots, mail out ballots?
We've already got a stack.
Oh, do you?
Yes.
Okay. When will you start sending those out there?
Those can be sent out around October 15th. It's about 21 days before the election. Once registration closes, we send ballots out the next day.
As you receive them, can you count them then, or do you have to wait till?
No. They are just secured, and then on election day in the afternoon, we have a mail board come in, and they process all those and run them through the tabulator. And then we don't run any tapes out of that tabulator until the polls close.
Okay.
So there's no results, nothing until.
They don't want anybody to have any idea which way it's going.
No, yeah,
That's why
it's
they-
actually illegal to run those tapes before the polls close, so.
But back to what Lon's comments were, I voted at Holcomb and it was really smooth as a slip. I used your electronic board and liked it.
Good.
That's what I've used the last couple of times.
We've had a lot of good feedback about the express votes. This year, I think we were at about 65% of early voters use those touchscreens. I don't have the final numbers yet for how, I just hadn't looked at it, but how many use those at the polling locations on election day. So a lot of people are jumping on, and usually after, some of them are apprehensive when they first try it, but once they try it, they come out, and we always ask them what they think, and we've gotten some really positive feedback. So there was one issue with those we had this year, and that was because somebody used hand sanitizer, and that card is a thermal card. So it just, everywhere she touched it with hand sanitizer on her hand, left fingerprints and black marks, so that it couldn't be read. So we had to read it manually, but so that was, we had all that extra hand sanitizer so everyone could be safe, but then when they touched their ballot, it made that ballot unreadable. So, but we took care of that in another way and learned a lesson from that. So I think somebody else kind of sprayed some hand sanitizer and ruined a few of the blank ones. So yeah, so we learned some of those new things this year. In addition to the final results, I did want to talk briefly about the township races. On the Democratic ticket, there were no township races that received at least 3 write-ins. So there were no candidates other than those who had filed on that ticket, which I think was just Garden City Township. So she'll be on the ballot in November. On the Republican side, Garden City Township had 1 write-in for treasurer of Garden City Township, and they received the required 3 votes. So we will reach out to them, let them know they have 10 days to decline that nomination. And other than that, we'll be sending out letters of nomination this week to all of the candidates. Garden City Township trustee also had 1 person who received the required 3. So we've got those 2 offices with somebody on the ballot for November. Garfield, both offices had candidates on the ballot, so Garfield is good. Ivanhoe, we had nobody receive the required 3 and nobody filed for either of those offices, trustee or treasurer. So we'll see what happens in November, but right now there's no one on the ballot for Ivanhoe in those 3 positions.
How many do you have to have in November to make them legal? Just one?
Yeah,
A write-in if they do
I'll
stuff?
have to double check. I just know for nomination, it has to be 3 and 1 more than anybody else, so.
If we do not get treasurers for these townships, do we have to find somebody to appoint or?
Yes, you would need to find somebody to appoint. So, if you know people that are politically minded or that are, just looking, it's not a big commitment, but definitely if people are interested in serving in those offices, getting them to tell all their friends to write their name in or something. But that's why I'm telling you is because this could become an issue in November if we don't get the required number of votes in those offices. So that's Ivanhoe that has nobody. Pierceville, we had candidates on the ballot for both races. Pierceville, we did have someone on the ballot for trustee, and then we did have a write-in that received enough votes. So Pleasant Valley is good. I think I said Pierceville, but Pleasant Valley is good. Sherlock, for treasurer, we had a candidate on the ballot, and the write-in that won for Sherlock trustee was actually our Larry Jones. And he's not eligible for that office, unless you want to give up your commission stint.
No.
But
How fast? Thank you.
So for Sherlock, we do not have a trustee that received enough votes, or a candidate that received enough votes for trustee. And in Terry, for both offices, we have no one. So really Ivanhoe and Terry, and then Sherlock trustee is where we need to focus going into November.
I might suggest you pick on the particular commissioner in that district who has to come up with a list. So
Can one individual not be treasurer and trustee then?
I don't believe so.
Oh, I thought we could, because I thought Betsy had checked that out.
No. And they actually, so Betsy was the candidate for Pleasant Valley trustee, and then we did have a treasurer that ran a write-in campaign and received the required
Yeah,
number
but
of
I mean,
votes.
she was on the ballot for both. I thought they.
No, she was not on the ballot for both.
Oh, I thought she was. Okay.
But
Yeah,
Matt
it's
Jones,
not my area.
I'm sorry?
Matt Jones
Well, he was on the ballot,
as treasurer,
yes.
and then he had 5 write-in votes on trustee.
But since he had since he actually filed for treasurer, then he's not eligible for the trustee, in the trustee spot.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood that.
We ready to certify this? You are, Mr. Chairman. I'll offer the motion that you sign the certification letter and that the election stand certified in Finney County.
Second.
any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion is carried. Dory, I'd like to thank you as our election office. For those in the public, you saw how thorough she is, so if there's any voter fraud in Finney County, she will find it. So, thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you, and I would like to thank our election board workers, those at the polling locations, and the special boards that we hired, the early board, the audit board, the mail board. Also reps and public works and the maintenance teams for the work that they did to make things happen. They help us always set up and tear down, and of course help us with the barriers at the last minute. And then also Finney County for allowing employees to work the polls. That's always helpful, and I think it's a good experience for them. And then last but not least, my election staff, because they are awesome. So.
I would agree. It's a team effort and appreciate everybody's help.
One quick question that you've referenced them a couple of times, but how do you come up with those early boards and the audit boards? And I mean, just what's your process? I don't have a problem with it.
The
but
same
I
way
just-
with poll workers, we reach out to people who've done it before. Sometimes they tell their friends, or they say, "Oh, I think so and so would be good at that."
So there's no advertising or anything, it's just you
We haven't
reaching
had
out?
to yet. Yeah, we've just done it through networking.
Okay,
Sometimes I've reached out to Dr. Clifford, as the Republican Committee Chairman, and then also on the Cynthia Marsh on the Democratic side.
Yeah.
And she's the one that she actually helped find a couple of our early board workers this year. And they turned out to be fantastic, so.
Good.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, gentlemen, let's move on to the point of order. We added a line item in our agenda dealing with the waiver at 3360 North 8th. I don't see staff, but I see Mr. Pinner. Would you care to come up on microphone and address us, please?
Morning, gentlemen. Morning.
Good morning.
And I guess I'm still requesting permission to change out a mobile home on 3360 North 8th.
How long have you had this property, sir?
Since 96.
And you're in front of us because the powers that be say no?
Yeah, everybody's telling me no, and I'm trying to work something out to where I can do it because it's part of my income and I really depend on it.
Mr. Chairman,
Dave?
I'm sorry. This is Dave, for those online. Mr. Pinner, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you, could you share with us, in the documentation, says the 3 dwellings have 3 septic tanks. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Where are those septic tanks located right now? I have a black and white map here.
Okay, if I can point that out to you.
If you wanted to walk up here closer and put your finger on, or I'll give you a pencil.
See, for the house, it would be back here behind the house. That's one.
Okay, now while you're at the house there, for one, where's the lateral field then?
And it goes out this way.
Okay,
It's right there.
all right.
The house is a 2-bedroom. There's 2 lateral lines. And this here is also a 2-bedroom, and the tank is located about in that area, also with a couple of lines. And the third one here, it's a 3-bedroom, and those lateral lines are right there, more or less.
Okay, y'all let me see what he's
I was
illustrating.
able to.
Yeah.
What my follow-up question is, when one of those septic tanks fails, where does the next septic tank system go? You're out of room, it looks like.
What we can do is to take the old one out and replace it.
Well, you have to find new,
We don't have to find any extra room or anything, you know, if it's taken out and replaced.
well, the ladder lines need to be new. They can't go back where the other ones were.
Okay.
So therein lies the problem and why the county's adopted the 5-acre philosophy for residents with a septic system. And anything smaller than that has to go to the new high-tech system that's about twice as expensive. So,
Yeah.
so when, I don't know how long those septic systems have been in there, but
2 of them have been replaced here within the last 15 years, and then there's one that I'm not sure how long it's been there. It's an older one. It probably wouldn't hurt if it was replaced, I guess, but 2 of them have been replaced within the last 15 years.
well, you're lucky if they'll last 20 years, or you're really lucky. So, okay, thank you. If you want to step back there so we can visit with you.
Lon?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was just simply, and we do have a little documentation, but we're being recorded and so forth. And so for not only us, but for anybody that might be watching or listening in, help us understand a little bit better why you're making this request. You keep referencing income or something, but help us from the beginning, if you will, why you're making this request.
To start with, the mobile home needs to be replaced. It's a 62 model. It's outdated and needs to be disposed of, you know, but not wanting to lose that income, I'd like to be able to replace it.
So if the waiver is denied, as staff has recommended, what are your plans?
the truth is, I don't know for sure what to do with the property there then, you know, because there's really nothing else I can do with it. I've been told that I can put a storage building on that property or something like that, you know, but, you know, the septic tank and all that, lateral lines and all that have to be coming out. You know, you can't build over the top of it, of course, you know. If I can't, replace the mobile home, then I guess all I can do is mow it and pay taxes on the property, you know? And I'd really just like to see use out of the property.
So, and maybe this was in the, and I didn't take time to read it all again today, but you have the 2 mobile homes in the house.
Yes, sir?
Is that all as one piece of property, or it's all as one piece of property?
Yes, I believe it's 1.9 acres altogether.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was less than 2, but yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Comments from,
That photo that was up on the screen isn't any,
It's a lot to the south, isn't it?
No, that's,
Yeah,
I don't,
it's one more up.
Yeah, it's one more,
Right there,
yeah, just above the,
right there.
just above the red dot.
oh, okay,
Right.
okay.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are
And
you
is
on
this-
the
and
city
is this
water?
one you're talking
I have my
about?
own well.
Is that this one you're talking about replacing?
Sorry, I didn't get
This one? Yeah. My hand got bigger, no.
Yeah, this is the house right here I'm talking about, and that right there is the well house. And the house up here is the one I lived in, so.
And you said the septic on the one you want to replace, where does it run?
It's approximately right there, and then the lateral lines, or there's 3 of them string out to the north.
And just, it doesn't have anything to do with your request for waiver, other than, what is the status of the other mobile home? Is it still in good condition? And-
Yeah, there's people living in it, it's still in fairly good condition, it's, I believe it's a 1982 model.
Thank you.
Is there someone in the 62? Is there someone in the 62 right now?
Well, the county put the 5-acre limit on these type of things just for this reason, because, you know, with septic systems in your well is located right next to where you're, you know, if you were on city water or something different, it might be a little different situation, but where you're supplying water to 3 residents and all those septic systems around there, I don't see how you can get around this.
Dave?
Mr. Chairman, have you had your water tested to see whether it's contaminated any or not?
It's been a few years ago since I have. Another thing I might add too, you know, I don't know when the city's gonna bring water up there. I mean, they're telling me we have a shortage on water, you know, it's what they tell me, you know, so I don't know how long it's gonna be before we have it, you know, but I understand if we did have it, that would make a lot of difference, you know. That would probably allow me to even build a house, but, you know, right now they're telling me I can't even build a house there. And, you know, if they had water up there and sewer, you know, then that would make a lot of difference, you know, but it don't sound like they have any near future plans for that. So, I mean, that's gonna make me just have the land sitting there, you know, then I don't know what to do with it like that, so.
Gentlemen, a lot of you guys know I served several years on the zoning board before I became a commissioner. And a lot of this issue came up, and it was not so much the well water as it is the septic. And that's where the 5-acre thing came in. And basically, sir, you've been grandfathered in for a number of years, and it pretty clearly states here, as long as you don't make any major changes, you are allowed to stay grandfathered in. But this is a major change, and that's what kicked you out, and why they say you cannot replace that home. And I guess I, for one, will support the planning division's rules and regs on this. There's lots of properties that are grandfathered in. And I think we'd open a precedent that we would not want to get into by granting you this. So that is my personal opinion. It will be up to the rest of the commissioners to make a motion one way or the other. But there is a reason for this, the rules that have been adopted, and I cannot tell you what year they were adopted, but 95?
95 was zoning with a 10-year, don't do any enforcement, and then another 10 years added onto that. So come up to 2015, and that's when the enforcement started.
Okay. Further questions for Mr. Pena? Comments? Where you want to go, guys?
Mr. Chairman, this Dave again, I understand your dilemma and I sympathize with it. But if we approve your waiver request, we're setting a precedent that I don't think we want to get into. So I'm going to offer a motion to deny your request for a waiver based on the fact that there's not enough room to grow septic systems and so on. So that would be my motion.
I'll second.
Further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to deny the waiver, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
We
Motion
wish you
carried.
luck with that.
Sorry, sir.
Yeah, it's just something that I don't think we want to get started with.
Well, I can understand at your point, as far as the septic tanks, not enough property and all that, but anyways, okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, let's move into the real meat, audit engagement. The superintendent, I know we have representatives that are working their way forward.
Thank you, sir.
I don't believe I recognize this one in front. She's got a mask on.
Wait,
Either way, yes,
Okay.
please.
How are you ladies?
just
today?
fine. I'll get rid of this when we get up.
I think you were provided with your audit books last week,
We were.
so you should
Yeah.
have them.
Do you guys hear anything from Arizona or New Mexico or wherever that?
Actually, it's Minnesota, isn't it?
is that
Sure.
where
Yeah.
Gary is?
Yeah.
Thought he went north, yeah.
Yeah. He went cold instead of war.
I was gonna say, did he survive the winter?
I think so. I think he had to do a lot of shoveling.
That just does not
Yeah. Mm-mm.
fit Gary.
Mhm.
Yeah, good morning, Teresa.
Good morning. Good morning.
Where would you like to
Alright.
start?
Okay, well, just real briefly, Kristen and I, we thought first, just as a brief mention, it's not posted on the internet, but in the packet you received, there was one letter that was pretty thick. It's the letter to the governing body. It's the same as it's been in the past, so we weren't going to spend any time over it.
So
Yes, I think so. Yeah, just goes over what the audit process was, if we had any difficulties or anything. So we'll touch briefly then on the numbers in the audit with the graphs, and then Kristen and I are going to spend a little bit of time hitting some of the key points in the management letter. So just as a note, though, the audit itself, the opinion on the audit was that it was an unmodified opinion for the regulatory basis. That's after we had basically 2 audits, because when we got in, and you saw in the management letter, if you had a chance to look at it earlier, that we did have a couple material weaknesses that the county staff went back and did a lot of extra work to resolve those and got us complete new numbers. We got those mid-June and got everything then finished up at the end of June. But after those changes, it did end up being an unmodified opinion for the regulatory basis financial statements that you see in the audit report itself. Looking at the graphs, the first graph there is the bar chart with the comparison of receipts and expenditures for the general fund, and it is just the general fund. Some of the key points I might make note of, we're starting with 2010, but if we actually had 2008 and 9 on there also, you would have seen that from 2008 through 2011, the expenditures actually exceeded the receipts in each of those years. During that time period, the county used effectively about $2.6 million of its operating reserves up in that period, which was the equivalent of about 5.8 mils that it spent during that time period. In 2015, then fortunately there was an increase in valuation that occurred. So the receipts did exceed the expenditures that year, and you were able to start building some of those reserves back up in the general fund. But then, as you'll recall, in 2016, we saw about a $61 million decrease in valuation. So 16 still ended up fairly good. That was even with the loss of about $2.4 million in the tax receipts. You had a slight increase in the mill levy that year, but it didn't make up for that full $2.4 million. In 2017, you see the receipts and the expenditures were cut about in half. That's when the Sheriff's Department moved out into a separate fund as you were gearing up for the tax lid going into effect. And then in 2018, the County Attorney's Office also moved over into that law enforcement fund. 2018 did see a valuation increase, but built a little bit of the reserves back. 2019 had an increase in receipts over expenditures, building some of the reserves back also. Those occurred in years when we've had valuation increases. 2017, the cash was down about $844,000. And between 2018 and 2019, you pretty well built that back, made that back. So, just real briefly on the next page of the graphs is the comparison of the receipts for 2019 compared to 2018, just as a percentage of the total. Transfers in are going to impact some of the percentages in the other areas, but this year transfers were down about 3%. In the prior year it was 5%. This year it's 2% of the total. Taxes were 80% in 2019 compared to 77% in the previous year. And the smaller chart pie to the right there is just the makeup of those tax dollars, since there's such a large percentage. Property tax was about 57% of the total, a slight increase this year compared to 52% the prior year. But sales tax was also up, which is a good thing. It was about 33% of the total compared to about 32% in the previous year.
Teresa, can we ask you a question? Will?
Yes, certainly.
What about the breakdown minerals? Are they in the? They're in that.
They're part of the ad valorem taxes.
So
yes.
You don't have that breakdown, do you?
I do not. I do not. I mean, we have the severance tax dollars. That's the intergovernmental revenue, is where the severance tax money is. But the actual ad valorem taxes on oil and gas properties would be in the taxes ad valorem.
Okay. All right.
Okay. That's fine. Feel free as we go. Then the next bar chart, though, takes those revenues and gives you the dollar comparison over the last 10 years. And you can see there in the taxes from 2010, the red bar on the left, through about 2014, which is the turquoisey one in the middle. We had valuation decreases in that time period of about 1.2 million. And with about a 1.7 mil levy increase, kept the tax dollars fairly flat, with some decrease there in the earlier years. From 2006 through 2015, the general fund levy was actually up a little bit, but overall, the levy for all funds in the county was pretty constant. In 2011, kind of the mustard color, we saw a $46 million decrease in valuation. And then in 2015, there was a $31.5 million increase in the valuation. Tax dollars were up as a result of that, even though the mill levy was down a little bit at that point, down about 0.2 mils. And then in 2016, we had the $61 million decrease in valuation. The tax dollars stayed fairly constant, a little bit less, but that was after a 1.8 mil increase in the mill levy. 2017 is the dark green, and that's when the tax revenues moved over into the law enforcement center to the new fund at the equivalent of $6.8 million. That year, we also experienced a $24 million decrease in valuation. 2018, pretty constant with the tax dollars, did experience an increase in valuation that year. And in 19, the gray column, the last column there, saw an increase in valuation resulting in the increase in tax dollars. That intergovernmental revenue is the severance tax dollars that comes in from the state. The 2019 does not reflect any. However, the county did receive severance tax dollars. It's just a matter of, in the process of the tax roll reconciliation and everything that was completed, then determined that the county's share of those tax dollars hadn't yet been transferred to the general fund. They're sitting in the tax agency accounts yet. So those have been moved over probably at this point in time. Licenses and fees are basically the officer fees, mortgage registrations and such. There was an increase in 2016 for some mortgage registration fees. 2019 was actually the last year you would be receiving those. So we would expect that 2019 and going forward that most of these fees are going to be down a little, holding fairly constant, but wouldn't expect any increases in that area. The other revenues, general miscellaneous type things, but that's also where the pilot wind farm monies are going into. And those started in 2014, basically. 2016, 2015, just some increases in general, but not much change then otherwise there. And the transfers in depend largely on where the commissioners felt the needs were, how they wanted to keep the levy constant and such. In 2013, there was some increase in transfers in that resulted from the closeout of the bond and interest fund as your debt was paid off and the excess monies in that fund were transferred to general. And in 2014, you transferred in from the landfill. And 2017, 18, and 19, you had transfers coming in from the landfill again, and then also some from the oil and gas reserves. Looking then at the expenditures for the general fund, the pie chart comparing 19 and 18 is the first set of graphs there. Transfers do have a big impact on these percentages. This year transfers were at 15%. That's down from the 19% the year before, as there were fewer transfers into some of the capital improvement reserve funds. As a result of transfers being down, there's a slight increase in the general government. It's 71% this year compared to 66% last year. Public safety is down a percentage also. The dollars then are on the bar chart following, comparing the 10-year period. As you look at general government and public safety, combined there from 2010 through 2013, those first three columns in both sets, they've held pretty steady with some small changes. And then in 2014, they both had an increase. That was when the county implemented a pay plan in adjustment. So adjustments occurred in that year to cover that. In 2016, in the general government area, the yellow bar, general government was just generally higher in the contractual and some of the building maintenance. And then in 17 to 18, some of the difference was timing issues on the payment of the county's insurance. They actually prepaid in 17 the 2018 insurance. 2019, the general governmental area contractual and commodities was up about 223,000, largely as a result of the timing on the insurance premiums in 18 to 19. Then, and just general increases across the board, a lot of postage and freight increases. Over in the public safety area for 2015, you'll see an increase there, pretty much attributable to changes in the county attorney's personnel area. It was up about 176,000. And then in 2016, it was up another 169,000. In that same time period, the sheriff's personnel was also up about 146,000 in 2015, and down though in 2016, 153,000. So kind of offset some of the increase that year that occurred in the county attorney's office. And then the big decrease in public safety in 17, of course, is when the sheriff moved out into its own fund, followed in 2018 by the county attorney's office moving. So since then, it's been fairly consistent.
What is public safety left, and what are you counting? Consider both of them separate funds.
I'll have to look that up for you, Larry. It's the district court, the judicial district, and CASA, basically. Yeah. The health and sanitation area has been pretty constant. That's your mental health appropriation and support. And then the transfers out depend on available cash, unused budget authority in each department, needs of the other areas, reserve funds. So you'll see in 2017, the green bar to the right, you did have additional transfers to the capital improvement reserve fund that year. That's also the year you started the operating transfer for the community service center building as it went online. Then in 2018, capital improvement reserve, the oil and gas fund reimbursement for the early payoff of the tax settlement on the Bonanza. And then there was some transfer for economic development incentives you made that year. 2019 was down then because there were fewer transfers made to the capital improvement fund last year. The next graph is a new one that we added in this year to kind of give you an idea where county-wide you can get a picture of where your cash balances are, and looking at it at a 10-year history. We've identified the funds as being either operating funds, reserved funds, which would be like your oil and gas reserve, your capital improvement reserve fund, special highway improvement would fall in as reserve funds. And then the restricted funds are those that you don't have a lot of control or say over how they're spent. They're governed by grants, bond issues, capital project type funds. So with those three areas in mind, you can see what the trends has been here over the last 10 years. 2015, most of the funds saw an increase. That's when valuation was back up and at the high, and you were building some of those reserves back up. Under the old philosophy of the budget, it build reserves when your valuation is up, so you can use it when it was down. So the restricted funds saw the large increase there in 2014. because of the bond issue in the capital project fund for the community center. So, the bottom part of this graph then just combines all the funds together and shows you the trend line as to what the cash reserves have done over that time period. So. And then finally, I think the last graph we had in the set was just a recap of the valuation, some of the tax items. Valuation, you can see from 2010 through 2020. Give me a second to find it. As you know, the trend.
Did you get that one?
I'm not finding nothing, but
I have it
Okay.
from audit committee.
Okay,
okay. I'll look at the screen.
okay,
Backside?
sorry,
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
It's on screen there. Valuation, as you're aware, it's had been up pretty good there in 2015, then took a deep dive in 2017 to even below where we were in 2011. Been trending back up then, although the trend over the 10-year period is a slight downward trend. The mill levy during that same time period is been trending upwards, and this is the total mill levy for the county. Usually it's the inverse picture. Valuation's down, mill levy's going to be up if we're going to try and maintain the same level of services. In 2017 and 2018, there was kind of an extra jump in there as you were positioning the county to deal with the tax lid, dealing with the decrease in the valuation and the use of some of the reserves that had occurred in that time period. Tax dollar wise, you can see it's trended upwards slightly. We had a few years there where it was down. The upward trend may not be as great as what's seen with the mill levy. The dollar spread in the axis is not quite as large as it is up above. So, and those tax dollars, as you're aware, you're funding your general fund services, your debt service, public works, aging, the ambulance and EMS, county employee benefit fund, the economic development, the free fair and fairgrounds, county health, historical museum, the library, the disability services, noxious weed, and law enforcement. So a number of large dollar items in there with law enforcement and public works, employee benefits also. So, even with the upward trend, if you go back and consider the mill levy as it compares to some of the counties similar size that we've looked at in the past, within the city itself, the taxing units, Garden City is still the second to the lowest of the 6 cities that were, when you look at Liberal, Hutch, Dodge, Garden, Hayes, and Great Bend. There's 4 of them that are considerably higher than we are here in Garden City. So
You used to prepare graphs for us, comparing other city or other counties, and you still do that, or?
we usually did that as part of the budget process, and I don't know, we had provided those to Robert if he had an opportunity to put those together for you or not. But okay.
Thank
So I won't steal any more of his thunder.
We like to know that number because
Yeah,
we're constantly accused of the highest taxes in the nation.
Well, you are not. You are not. County-wise, you might be a little bit higher within the county, but it's a function of how each county is a little bit different and where their services are provided. So when you boil it all down to one entity taxing group, looking, for example, within here at the city of Garden City and comparing the other cities, I get to the right line. We were in 2019 for the 2020 budget, just over 174 mills, or no, that's not, just over 160 mills for Garden City, compared to Liberal at 190 mils, and compared to Dodge City at 183 mils. So,
Good number, thank you.
so,
Did you hear that, public? Teresa, I have one question. Sometimes in the past, you gave us our unaccounted cancer balances as a percentage where we are and where we need to be. How do you feel we are on a percentage basis?
this past year, the general fund was actually up, and if you disregarded the transfers, the cash balance was about 67% of the expenditures. That was in part, though, also due to the fact that there was room for additional transfers that could have been made, but because of the timing of resolving the material weakness within the funds and getting those changes made, the management determined that they would not make those extra transfers last year. They carried it forward into the cash balance, which is, I'm sure, has helped make the budget process this first year for Robert a little bit easier for all of you too. So yeah, for across the board, the cash balances as percentages of each fund has been pretty good. So,
Okay, thank you.
other
Are you ready for
questions
further
on
questions, Teresa?
Mhm.
Okay.
Before we get into the management letter, sure.
One quick question. You're talking about cash balances, but that's not reserves, correct?
That percentage was just for the general fund.
Okay. We used to hear from Gary that the healthy amount for reserves would be somewhere between 25 and 30%.
That's correct, yeah.
Where are we?
For
Are we healthy?
operating purposes. And so the general fund, that percentage this year, you're at 67%. So you
we're
were
really
well
healthy.
above the limit there.
Okay.
But like I said, you didn't make all the transfers that you might have normally made. So that did help and made your budget process, I think, this year a little easier to deal
All right.
with.
Yeah,
So,
thank
Okay.
Further questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out on the bar graph for 2020, just in case the public thinks we
True.
were going wild with expenditures, that's budget authority.
That is
For
correct.
instance, if we had an environmental catastrophe at the landfill, we would need authority to spend all of that landfill money. But
True.
we're
It's
not
budget
likely to do
authority,
that.
but it's also saying that if we spend all the room we had budget authority for, we'd be spending all our cash reserves in the general fund also to make up that difference in the receipts. Yes. Good
And we're
point,
not
Dr.
likely to
Clifford.
do that.
We certainly hope not.
And again, as I like to point out, the flawed state tax lid,
Mhm.
with the juicy reserves we have, my inclination would be to use reserves to lower the mill levy. But
Mhm.
if we were to do that, we can't get the reserves back.
Not very,
Without
not,
violating the
not very
state's flawed
easily,
policy
yeah.
of the tax lid.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
even more reason for the tax lid to go away.
Yeah. And we're in about the fourth year now of the tax lid. I think from what we understand, the life of the tax lids usually run about 9 years. So,
Well, that's encouraging.
we've made it about halfway through, so maybe something
They keep
will start.
exempting things out of it, so one of these
Mhm.
things is gonna die a slow death.
Mm-hmm,
So
eventually, so. Okay, so those are the numbers. If you don't have any other questions there, we'll move over to the management letter. And I'm gonna let Kristen talk for a minute.
Right. So the management letter is the other loose letter that you would have had with the financial. It should be at the back. I probably
It's
stuck in the
about
back.
8 pages, 9 pages.
It's probably in
In the back of this.
no, it'll be another loose letter. I think that's the,
Got too many pieces of floating paper on my desk. What's it look like, guys?
Is it coming up on the screen?
There should have been 2 letters with each packet. Okay.
Just finding these.
It's dated August 11.
Mm,
Oh, you got it on your
I have it on my screen.
No, that's not, that's the
No, on
audit.
my screen.
Oh, okay,
That's the proposal for the,
okay.
You're pulling it up out of your packet, Dave.
It says audit engagement letter. I'm sure that's
No,
what.
no, that's the engagement letter. Okay. Okay. Sorry. If you want to go over the overview of it, so we get the.
What you're saying, you'd like for us to consider hiring you for another year or 2, right?
Well, the engagement letter, if you'd like to move on to that item, we could. We would like to work with the county again in the future years. So we did propose the 5-year engagement letter. We've been doing 5-year periods here in the past, locking in our fees. This year, the initial fee to start the 2020 audit, we did go ahead and leave it at the base fee that we have here for 2019. So we did not take an increase in inflation or anything from 2019 to 2020 in the base fee. And then we're proposing with that base fee a 2% inflator each year. Right now, the 5-year Consumer Price Index 5-year average was 1.8. The June Annual Employment Cost Index was running 2.7. So we kind of settled to the lower end in between. So would appreciate the consideration and opportunity to continue working with you all.
You said will be an additional cost to a single audit.
The county, that does include the basic single audit already, because the county is a single audit again this year and has been for most years that we've worked with you. If you have additional major programs, there could be a modification to that. So in the past, typically, you've only had one major program. So if that would be the case in 2020, and the major program just switches from WIC to Sparks, there may be a little bit of difference if there's a lot of additional compliance testing, but hopefully not a significant amount. If there's a requirement that both funds are audited as major programs, which I doubt it will be necessary, there would be some additional costs then for all the extra compliance testing on that additional program.
Oh, that's fast.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Dave, for those online, Teresa, I've been on the commission now, just completing 12 years. U.S. Hooper and Dick has provided our audit services that entire time.
Mhm.
We have, on occasion, over those 12 years, discussed, do we owe it to our taxpayers to seek proposals elsewhere? I don't know how other commissioners feel. I've been pleased with your work, and I don't think there are a whole lot of accounting firms locally that probably are clamoring for business, but maybe so. Do we, in the interest of transparency and as a service to our taxpayers, do we owe it to our taxpayers to take this under advisement and see what might be out there for comparison? Only asking the question, not proposing. So,
Anybody want to address Dave's concern?
What is the financial cost? You know, that look, I can't see here.
It's on about.
The base,
next to
the
last
base
page, I think
fee
it is,
was,
or something. 77,000. It's the base.
Okay.
Plus a 10%.
77.6. Mhm.
I want to say next to last page, am I correct on that?
Page 6.
I do know that from some other organizations with which I have affiliation, that trying to find some accounting firm to take on the audit responsibilities, it's a task. You know, some, the local ones have no interest in expanding their business field, I guess.
Well, the governmental field, I'm not aware that there's
Oh,
anybody in town that is doing governmental audits. With the single audit requirement, there is additional continuing education requirements. We have to have an additional 40 hours of just audit and accounting, of which 24 of those have to be specific to governmental.
I'm recalling, I think, Commissioner Clifford, I don't want to embarrass him, but I think you asked at one point, have we ever gone out for proposals before? And this would be appropriate to ask that question right now. And if there's not a concern, not a need for that, then let's adopt the.
Yeah, I think we had Randy or Mr. Hardington look into it for us 2 or 3 years ago, but couldn't find anyone interested.
So all fellow commissioners are all satisfied with the.
Well, I guess my opinion is that nobody has come forward, a competing firm, to say, throw their hat in the ring, that it's a mid-issue. So,
Well, we always try to strive to do business with local firms, and I don't think any other local firms have expressed interest in it. And so that's,
We're not aware of any.
Yeah,
We don't see them as members of the Government Audit Quality Center with the AICPA, which we are members.
I'm in no way displeased with your service. That's not what I'm
I
implying.
understand.
I-
You have a fiduciary responsibility. and
he does
that's
this
good.
every once in a while.
Well,
It's okay.
I needed to get my 2 cents in before Lon does.
Well, thank you. And I'm on the clock. No, I don't know if there is anyone else in town that's interested, but I do know what Teresa is saying is absolutely true, and that is governmental auditing is different than private entity auditing. And it takes another set of credentials, if you will, to do that. So there are a limited number of firms throughout the state that do governmental auditing. And I would guess, and I'm taking Teresa's word for it, I would guess there's no one else within this locality and maybe within the region that's doing governmental audits as is Lewis Hooker Dick.
Now, Mr. Chairman,
Mm-hmm.
I want to make a point that's is a feather in the hat of Lewis Hooper and Dick, of what we call the outside agencies, library, senior center, the Finney County Community on Aging, Fair Board, on and on and on. You guys also audit them, do you not?
They are included as
So
part of
there's
the
something
county.
to be said with having that knowledge of what the peripheral agencies are doing to bring to the table. So with
Is that
that,
encompassed in your language that you use?
Yes. Mhm. Now, the Extension Council, I think they would be a separate governmental entity.
They will
in
be
the-
different
next
after,
year, yeah.
or going forward, yes.
Discussion, if further discussion, if not, I'd like to hear a motion.
go ahead and I'll second your motion.
So we'll engage the super and Dick for county audits through 2024 with the 2%, not to exceed 2% increase.
And I'll second that motion.
And base fee starting at 77,600.
So modified.
Further discussion? There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, we
Teresa.
appreciate it.
Roundabout way of getting there, but we got there.
Okay,
Can you
appreciate that.
find a smaller tree next to you?
Well, PDF, you got your iPad. But yeah. That being said, though, we're gonna move on to the management letter, which
Yeah.
maybe is
Go back to the
not
audit.
as, not as happy of news as we would like to provide. But go ahead, Kristen.
Okay, so looking at your letter, the first couple pages is the cover letter. It's the same as it's been in the past. About the third paragraph down gives you a definition of what a deficiency in internal control would be. And then a little further down in that same paragraph is when those deficiencies would rise to the level of a material weakness. And during this year's audit, the county did have 2 material weaknesses that Teresa mentioned earlier that did increase the audit time this year, and then also the timing of delivering the audit. If you turn to page 3, we're going to go over some of the more significant items we noted during the audit, as we went over this entire letter in detail with the audit committee already. And then we're going to go over these comments at a department head meeting in a couple weeks. So on page 3 lists both of the material weaknesses we noted. The first one, control procedures over cash should be in place to prevent, detect, and correct potential misstatements in the financials. And this includes proper review and reconciliation functions. During the audit, we noticed that cash balances were not being completely reconciled on a timely basis. And the reason this comment rose to the level of a material weakness was the dollar amount of unreconciled items we noted during field work in March. The treasurer's office worked at getting these items reconciled for us and then provided us with a new trial balance the middle of May. I think as of now, the treasurer's office has worked on getting a better system in place, along with getting the accounts reconciled through year end, and now also having a better understanding of the new software that was implemented last year. So hopefully next year, these items have been resolved. So at the bottom of the page is the second material weakness, and it deals with control procedures over the recording of journal entries. During the audit, we noted journal entries were made which lacked proper supporting documentation and without going through the county's approval process. There was nothing noted during the audit while looking through the journal entries. However, the potential was there that inappropriate journal entries could be made without being detected. So we just recommend that the control procedures over journal entries be reviewed and that documentation be maintained for all the journal entries. And then that documentation and the journal entries are all reviewed by management.
Just real briefly on page 4 there, as far as the compliance with Kansas statutes. The first couple are immaterial ones that have been repeated from the past as far as remittance of fees and some funds with deficit unencumbered cash balances as a result of them being grant reimbursements and that type of thing. The bond payments, not significant. The state requires the monies be at the state's office 20 days ahead of time. It might have been a day or 2 late. Some of that could be because the state was late getting the bills sent out also. So the money was on hand at the state in time to make the bond payments, so not a significant item. As far as the lease agreements, there was a lease entered into in 2018 that was just provided to us in 2019. That was for the body cams at the Sheriff's Department. The lease was with Lease Finance Partners. It did not contain the required language for municipal leases, basically what they call the chicken clause, that if you don't have funds available or appropriated for the lease, you can cancel the lease. That terminology was not contained in the lease agreement. So we really recommend if department heads are going to be looking at lease agreements, those should be brought to the commissioners for their approval and review to make sure all of the components, statute requirements and are included in the terms of those lease agreements. So,
You have a dollar, what, threshold on that we should look at, or all leases?
the statute applies to all capital leases.
It's my understanding that the Board of County Commissioners are the only ones that can enter into those debts.
Would seem appropriate in light of the budget authority requirement, yeah.
At least my history, that's where we always brought those to the board.
And there's only one of these that wasn't,
That we were aware of.
that you're aware of.
Because like I said, we were not made aware of this lease in 2018 when it was entered into. It showed up here in 2019. So the possibility could exist that there are other small leases out there that capital leases. And then the last item there under Kansas statutes deals with the tax roll reconciliation requirement that the treasurer's office has. Requires that the tax rolls be reconciled each October, and that reconciliation be reviewed here with the commissioners. That did not occur this last year. We actually received the tax roll reconciliation, I think, around June 22nd. You know, if it had been done timely, like I had mentioned earlier when we were going through the revenue graphs, we might have caught the fact that the severance tax dollars hadn't gotten transferred to the county's general fund like they should have been. But, so I think there's processes in place now to help that going forward. So just when November 1st rolls around, you might remember to ask if you haven't seen it. Okay.
Okay, if you'll turn the page. Under cash, the first couple comments are just general reminders. Signature cards, make sure they get updated as staff change. And then also to look at old outstanding items, as there's a statute allowing the county to void outstanding items over 2 years old. Return to the fund or submit to the state as unclaimed property. The third comment under cash, timely deposits allow the county to earn additional interest on funds and reduce the risk of loss. At the end of the year, the county had a significant amount of receipts on hand that were held by the county a couple of days due to the holiday. We just recommend taking those deposits to the bank's lockbox daily, just to minimize the potential for misappropriation of funds for the county. The next comment under regulatory basis of accounting, accrued receivables aren't recognized. And during the audit, it came to our attention that there's certain revenues being recorded at the time of service instead of when cash is received. So we just recommend that the county review the policies, and I think too with the new software being implemented, how revenues are recognized. And then the last comment under cash, during cash procedures, we noted wire transactions outstanding on the bank reconciliation for time periods beyond the normal bank processing times for wires. By nature, those transactions should clear within the same month they're recorded. So we recommend the Treasurer's office review these items and make appropriate corrections on an ongoing basis to keep those cleaned up. And then the bottom two comments under disbursements, reminder as department heads are reviewing purchase orders to make sure all required documentation is attached before submitting them for payment. And that would be any supporting invoices or required bids. It takes extra time for the clerk's office to follow up on any missing documentation. So make sure that's attached before submitting them.
2 or 3 comments as far as grants on the top of page 6. The second paragraph there, maybe one of the more key ones. Monitoring the receipts of those grant monies to be sure that they're coming in timely, they're being recorded and deposited on a timely basis. We had a HIDA grant reimbursement that came in, and the county received the check in June of 2019, but it did not get recorded until February of 2020. So developing a process, monitoring process to ensure amounts are received and deposited on a timely basis. The last one there then, as far as the federal grants, significant program funding for the county is especially true here this year now with the Sparks and the CARES Act money. You want to be monitoring to assure that all available funds are expended for each grant and the grant agreements are properly completed and renewed on a timely basis. This past year we did have the youth service grant that did not get resubmitted to the state by its deadline for renewal, resulting in the county having to refund some money to the state on that program. So I think you now have somebody appointed in place to monitor all the grants and working on improving that whole process. So we're good.
At the bottom, the agencies and departments, the remainder of the current year comments are for the agencies of the county. All are minor. Like I said, we're going to go over them in detail at the department head meeting in a couple weeks. And then on page 8 starts a handful of the comments that were resolved from prior year's management letter. So hopefully that portion of this letter has a number of comments that will be resolved next year going forward.
So that's kind of the highlights out of this. Like Kristen said, we went through it in detail with the audit committee. We try to hit everybody, not physically, but make them aware of the issues as we encounter them during the audit process. And then we're sitting down with department heads here in a couple of weeks to go through them all again in detail. So, but we're more than happy to try and entertain, answer any questions you might have on it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, please.
Sure.
My question is just clarification on page 7. You have the heading of Extension Council, and you have reference to an executive session. You're saying the Extension Council, not the Board of Commissioners, but
No,
the
Extension Council Board.
had an executive session in which they did not give the reason.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I just want to make sure that we were clear on that.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, feel free if you're looking back through it later and you have any questions. Oh, go ahead, Larry.
I'm not the only ones asking questions.
I asked one.
I have a comment. Well, after I served on the audit committee for a few years, and so I'm vaguely familiar with what the system was. But with all this money that's coming in for the Sparks grants, it would be interesting to see. Do you have any type of tracking mechanism that they've provided you guys with on the audit side, or how this money is supposed to be spent? Is the government offered anything to you
Well,
yet, or is that?
at this point, we have the same information that's available to the county. The compliance supplement that's prepared at the federal level has just been released, or is not.
It's supposed to be released this week.
This week, okay. They are supposed to have information in on the various programs for the CARES Act. I don't know if the Sparks one will be in there yet. We do know that there's going to be some special training available through our membership in the Government Audit Quality Center that is going to be opened up, and we're inviting all of the participants in the program, so the grant recipients, the county administration, and others to sign up for that training so that they know from an audit perspective what they might have to deal with if they've not been subject to single audits in the past. But
Well,
the
see, where we're
specific
contracting
testing,
with
we
an
don't.
outside agency to kind of
Mhm,
guide us through this whole process. And how would the audit, you'll have to audit them too, won't you, when it comes?
Actually,
Well-
the expenditures are going, revenues and expenditures are tracking entirely through the county system.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, so the outside agency is really helping with the administrative aspect of it. Yeah.
Well, there's lots of dollars there, so.
Yes, there are. There will be a lot of entities that are subrecipients of it that here at the county here, you'll have some extra responsibilities in monitoring those subrecipients and stuff. And so I imagine part of our requirement in the audit process is seeing what your control process was in monitoring those and how they reported back to you and such. So, which will be different than what you've had in the past.
Further questions?
Just a comment, in the audit committee, we talked about the frequent offenders as far as receipts when people are using government purchase cards. And you all saw the sticky notes on the bills this morning. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous in some departments. So, I'm ready to do public shaming of individual department heads over this issue, or put people on notice that they're not going to be reimbursed for some of these expenses. I just think we've tolerated it for a long time, and it needs to end. I don't know what leverage we can give our administrator to handle this, but if folks have to come here publicly and explain it, that it would certainly get their attention.
Juan?
I would just add to that, and in Bill's camp, I think you can't have that go on as long as it has. But did I understand you correctly? You're meeting with department heads this week or sometime?
September 1st, 2 weeks,
September.
in 2 weeks.
So I think the message, my point is, I think the message needs to be carried to that meeting from Robert and the auditors.
Mhm.
And after September 1st, if it's not being resolved, then the public shame, or whatever language you use, comes into place. Because I agree, we can only permit that to go on so long. Because it creates more work for another department.
We do have to chase them. Typically, we get those back, and if we don't get them back, the employees reimburse them. However, we've started tracking for if this is gonna happen for the third time, then no more card. If you can't use it responsibly and follow the procedures that you agreed to when you signed your cardholder agreement, then no more card, so.
But I think the message to that department meeting, and piggybacking to what Bill said, needs to be very strong and clear from the auditors and from the administrator, and if need be from the clerk, that it's, the board may interact with them.
The only way we can really actually control them is pull the cards.
Right.
Mhm.
But I think we have an opportunity September 1st to
Mhm.
address that clearly.
But Larry, just be aware there are other, what would I call them, extramural cards like Target cards, Sam's cards, Walmart cards that certain department heads have. So you're right, we have some leverage on our official cards, but we have another issue outside that. Not aimed for those non-receipted expenses. I think gets people's attention. And I admit it's harder now because of all the plastic interaction. They frequently say, "Do you want a receipt?" And you have to actively say, "Yes, I want my receipt." But you pass that on for us.
Further questions, observations?
Appreciate you ladies' time.
Thank you. We appreciate your attention to it. And if anything comes up later, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us. We're more than happy to try and answer them. We look forward to continuing working with you. So thank you.
Hope to see you next year.
Okay.
Thank you, ladies, very much.
Have a good day.
You too.
All right, before we continue on, let's take a 10-minute break. We will resume at 10 after 10. John, if you'll work your way forward for a discussion on the lateral of sewer district number 2.
Right after break time.
You know, that was
We're figuring you out.
becoming a habit, isn't it?
But it's always been a
Tradition.
I guess we're talking about a petition, we have a petition and a memo of understanding for lateral sewer district for Mr. Harmon. They want to extend the line from behind where the Temples live to back to his house to tie into sewer. 2 lots, the one lot in between doesn't really need it right now, but I think Mr. Harmon talked to them about getting an easement, them and the golf course. And if, I think what we need to do is if you approve the permit, okay, the permit and the memo, we get going with the hearing would be the next step. And then working on easement for the sewer line.
Now, where
Here.
you
Okay.
running in these lines?
From there,
Oh.
The little
Behind
okay.
lots
Green dots
20
are where it is now.
Pardon that?
And you need to cut across 2103.
2103, and we'll go up on 2105, which is the petitioner.
John, will that line extend to the far end of his, lot and future connectivity?
Here to here.
That would be the intention.
Bill's
City.
Yes, sir.
right. He's a
Or close to it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think he's talked to the golf course at Southland about getting easement behind, so getting 10 foot from each property and 10 foot from the golf course.
Okay.
Or 20 foot each. Or however that works out, where we can get an easement for this year.
And who does the inspection on that? Is that you?
We will as they get constructed. I think Mr. Harmon contacted contractor for estimates on price. Pretty much the same way we've handled the others that have done that. It'll be grinder pump force main because of where it's tying into the existing force main.
Grinder pump is the responsibility of
Responsibility of the
the.
landowners. And Mr. Harmon is here if we have any questions for him.
So the homeowners in the 2103 and 2101, they're ready.
2101 is already hooked up
They're on.
and has that, that's with the green line there.
Oh, okay.
Extension. We'll just extend
Oh,
from
I see
that
what you're saying, yeah.
to the end of 2105.
Well, I would imagine as time goes on, the folks on the line will be asking to get on.
Yeah, on that 2103, I've talked to him and his septic's working fine, but I told him I need it done, so I'll take care of all that line. And I will even put a riser in there for when he has to tie in, that he can tie into that, and pay his fee instead of asking him to pay for that
Yeah.
whole line because I need it. He didn't say anything about paying for it. I decided that, hey, I gotta have it, so I'll go ahead and take care of it. So it's a no-brainer for him.
Is that a pressure line or is that gravity?
Their pressure, yes,
3 inch, 4 inch?
that'd be 3 inch.
John, I was talking to Ms. Harmon during the break. When you did your capacity study, is there capacity enough to handle all the homes that are on septic currently?
It appears to be, we'll be really at capacity with the lagoons if we add all the homes. I think if we're going to that route and we start adding all the homes, we look at expanding the lagoons too. But for now, half of them will easily be able to handle for sure.
And of course, I previously looked into an extension there on the north side of Grandview East to tie in where the green line is. And it was prohibitively expensive. Are there federal or state programs or grants to help us with that kind of trenching.
The only ones, I mean, we've had the USDA grant loan that we're working with SD3. A lot of times that's like income on what gets paid for, what doesn't, or if it's loan or grant.
It's based on Illinois low and moderate income for under the federal housing.
So
Normally
not
in this
like,
area, you're probably not going to qualify for that 50% of Illinois.
Dave?
John, does this take the permission of the other folks that are already on the sewer line, or they're just quiet
No,
about this?
You're the control, you're the,
Okay, their monthly rates won't change because of this.
their mills, they're charged, assessed a mill anyway.
Yeah, okay.
I believe. Assessed on the property. The only thing we need would be an easement from 2103 to get across his land.
Well, if he's getting set up for future use of that line, that ought to be an easy easement to get a hold of.
And if Mr. Harmon's a good neighbor to him, then
Yeah.
that makes it easier too. No, they'll pay a tap fee also, as well as putting the line in. The $500 tap fee will go towards.
It's a little cheaper than a septic tank replacement, so.
Well, I still gotta pay for my tank, so it's about $18,000 deal plus the lateral, all together. So I talked to Johnson Septic, they said they're running about 12,000 for the septic in right now.
Yeah, he's gonna come out about the same if we replace the septic or hooking up the sewer. I don't think he's saving any money either way, but in the long run,
This is a better deal.
his lots are pretty well full.
Backyard.
Further questions? And your pleasure then?
So the action today would be to accept the petition? Is that what the motion would be today?
Yes, actually, you'll vote on the petition to adopt that. And you'll have to vote on the agreement as well.
Okay.
That's in there. The agreement is, in essence,
That MOU that,
yes.
so two separate motions is
That's
what we're
correct.
saying? Well, Mr. Chairman, to move this along, I would first move that we adopt the petition for creation of a lateral sewer district for 2105
Grandview East.
Grandview East, yes.
Clifford seconds.
Further discussion on the motion to adopt the petition? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
And Mr. Chairman, I would further move that we approve the memorandum of understanding for sewer district number 2. Period.
I'll second again.
Further discussion on the approval of the memorandum of understanding? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
There you go.
There you go, Kurt.
So then
Start digging.
There goes my money.
Yeah. Hey, just money. Just money.
That's right. Thank you very much.
That money well spent in the long run, sir.
schedule a hearing.
Thank you,
too,
Kurt.
or-
Further things for us, John?
The petition.
Right, so next time or,
I can't remember whether you can do it next time or whether it's 10 days.
that I don't know.
We'll look into that then.
Okay,
Okay. You'll have your.
Your public hearing.
Yeah, but I don't recall whether it's a 10-day wait or not.
It very probably is.
Cool, thanks.
You want to talk about anything else?
You want your road and bridge stuff while you're around, John?
I'll be back. Thanks again, thanks.
See Colleen, so
Hey, John? John? Oh, did you make?
oh, you had to get another handful.
yeah, one more stuff. I guess I'll go first. I guess updates, Jenny Barker Road, they are still working on excavating the channel the last week for DD2. They're backfilling the old channel. They are working in the retention pond area, excavating some of that, and they backfilled the box, and this week, this is all Spore. The Spore will be working on the retention pond still, and then doing grading on the roadway on that more section that they had closed off for traffic when they built the box. Middle Creek Corp, they're the contractor that's been working on relocating the water line and the utility corridor on the west side of Jenny Barker Road. They'll continue working on the corridor, moving their way south, and move the water line. So that's the only things that really are scheduled to go on next week. I think there's probably still a lot of work yet. I have some pictures if you'd like to see them. I can pass them around. That I didn't take them. The inspectors for Wilson are out there taking pictures and
Did you say it was working in the retention pit? Is that cost?
Spore. Spore is the general contractor.
Are they reshaping that at this point yet, or is that to come?
What's
The
that?
retention pit, are they reshaping that
Yes.
already, or is
Yeah,
it?
you'll see it's, if you drive by, it's changed quite a bit from where it was even 2 weeks ago.
Are there still plans to put a traffic signal on Jenny Barker and 156?
It's not in the project, but the city still wants to have it done.
Oh, it's not. I thought it was part of the project.
I think there was money there for it, but I don't think KDOT has approved that yet. It's a KDOT.
Yeah.
Wish list want to have, or not KDOT, the city wants and KDOT won't let them have. Not enough warrants met for traffic signal.
But there was money set aside for that, yeah.
Yes.
But it's a KDOT question.
The asphalt project on Finney Scott finished up Friday afternoon. We really improved the looks of our friend, it looks like, or it sounds like, so with a little bit of asphalt. Yeah, they finished up Friday afternoon, so the guys are back to the office getting ready to do, or continue what they were doing before.
How about the railroad crossing there?
We helped it, but not a lot. I wish the railroad was a little more proactive and would raise their line some.
It's a pretty good speed bump.
It is. I've seen stuff falling out of trucks before as they fly through there.
I might point out east on the Finney Scott, on the dirt road, Scott County. I hope did you guys have any participation, but they dramatically improved that road. It is 300% better than it was.
Roger's gonna take all the credit.
You ever take credit for some of that?
Not
Roger?
until my turn comes.
At least it's passable. They completely rebuilt it, much like you have done a lot of your roads, and it's great.
KDOT off-system bridge program applications are due at the end of the month. I've been working on the Ravenna Road Bridge to apply for that. Just let you know if it's 80-20 split on project and inspection cost. I'll apply or make the application for both, but it may come down to the end where we can still do our own inspection. But if you're okay with that, I'll turn in the application. And then maybe move our regular county bridge project to now the Big Low, that we have our that bridge that's weight restricted. Just to right around, is it the Barlow? I think the Barlow, Cook Barlow. Just south of the curbs, there's a bridge that we have that, in the last round of local road bridge program, they did weight studies. This one has weight restrictions on it now, at about 32 tons for a semi and trailer. And with the highway patrolman lives in about a mile away, they've been getting a few tickets up there, so.
Is this the project you were working on with the bridge / culvert already, or is this a separate one?
This is a separate one.
What about the first one? Is that in place or been completed, or?
The community road we finished early in the year. I'm not sure which one you're talking about. I've got a couple bridge projects that are up there, people asking for. DD2 or DD1 is asking to fix, DD1 is asking to fix up the Anderson Road.
Maybe that's
north
one.
of Peterbilt. They offered up some money to replace it. I'm looking into a precast, and maybe our guys can do that.
That's the one that's a little narrow for the combines to get across in.
Or trucks.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty narrow it's right at 22 feet wide, 24 feet wide.
Yeah, there's if you fall off of that, it'll jar you a little bit.
Just they'll wake you up, that's for sure.
What, on Big Low, you're talking about the bridge that goes across the farmer's ditch, big ditch?
It goes across it's one of the draws up there.
So you're not talking about the bridge right north of Highway 50 there?
No, it's
Okay,
further
I thought
north,
it was-
almost up to, almost to the Barlow, about a mile south of Barlow. There's a bridge in a draw where the east-west road
Oh,
is.
yeah, I know what
Low.
you're talking about. It's right east of the Rumbies,
Somewhere.
in there, yeah.
I think so, yeah.
That draw is what washed out here a couple of years ago.
I'm quite sure there's several of them that aren't going to meet weight limits. So
Especially now that this last go around, they're rating bridges for a special fire truck. And we have a couple of them that are single unit trucks. But when they put loaded with water, they are overloaded by any normal standards. So now they're starting to rate them. And it was either put up the signs we have with a special placard underneath, that would cause us to raise sign heights and new posts. We just replaced them with that truck restriction on a 3-weight sign like we use. So sometimes they kind of mess up our deal, but this one, it is actually load rated for our weight restricted for a semi and a trailer, and that wouldn't be the fire truck, that's just a regular,
tandem.
yeah.
32,000 on tandem.
As typically legal weight would be 43, and the bridge is rated at 32 tons.
Dave?
We have to ask John about a lighted stop sign at Third and the bypass.
KDOT goes through and check on that again. I haven't heard back since last week or week before when you asked.
Why don't you just put it up and see what happens?
Would you invite Mr. Ron Hall to come to a commission meeting and explain why we can't get an answer?
I can tell you what he'll tell you, but yes, I can invite him to come next week or next time. It's Topeka holding that up, and I don't know how many times
Would that guy in Topeka be somebody we know well? who used
No,
to-
that's not the guy holding it up. I'm sure if that was up to him, we'd probably have it. Yeah, he's pretty good at some of that stuff too. Those signs is I almost went and bought them. I could still go buy them. They're $1,200 a piece, or at least last time I looked.
John, we can't read anyway, so save your money.
Well, if it flashes on you, don't have to read.
Oh, that sign, I'm talking about the bridge signs.
You know, I don't know if I would have a problem with you driving on them, other than the sign protects me from not having it there, but, it's the highway patrolman that bothered everybody.
Those darn highway patrolmen.
Yeah. Lawn's been,
Well, just a question on farmland. Have you had any discussions with TP&L and so forth with all the changes that are going on out there with Empirical and TP&L? Are they in tune to the fact that farmland probably won't be able to be used for exit of their blades and so forth when we get started on that project?
It will be, to an extent. I haven't dove into the plans that far, but I think there is arrangements for at least a one-way traffic at a certain time, so they
Well,
would be able to come out.
I think we need to make sure that we're being good neighbors with TP&L. I
They-
have concerns about them being good neighbors with us sometimes with their fences and trees and the grip systems that they haven't done yet. But at the same time, they've put up a fence, they've divided off some property for an Empirical. And I don't know if they're planning on exiting on farmland in the near future, where now they're exiting out of an entrance west of the mobile home park. And just so that somebody doesn't scream and holler one of these days when construction starts on farmland. So it's just a public relations thing.
But the city has been with easements and stuff for utility. Yeah, I don't know where we're at. I haven't had conversations with them, but I'm sure we've had.
I think we
With the
probably
city
need to
council.
just, or through the city or something, just for good public relations.
Well, the project's for them, so.
Well, I understand, but I
I
don't know
mean,
if
that's
they
why
know
we're
what,
doing it.
I don't know if they know the time frame and so forth. And they may know everything about it. I'm not saying they do or they don't. I'm
They
just
should have
saying,
at one time, it was their engineers that.
there just needs to be good communication, because I can see that being a bone of contention here one of these days.
I think, yeah, okay.
I have one last question. I'm gonna go back to Jenny Barker Road for a second. We have trenches open. We want to put fiber optic in there. Is there any chance, or this trench is gonna be closed before we're even to that point?
I think they're putting a conduit in there that's gonna be vacant and available for future use.
Oh, perfect. That's the answer I wanted to hear. Thank
There's
you,
at
Doug.
least one, if not two, empty conduit first.
I saw your picture with the trench, and a couple looked like conduits in there, pipes, whatever they were, but good, thank you.
Anything else for me?
Guess you're off the hook.
Awesome.
Roger.
Gentlemen,
How's the fishing?
wake up a little bit.
You did lots of good reviews on your park on Facebook.
Good, that's what it's all about. I'll just step through a bunch of stuff here that we've been doing. Road and Bridge, trying to keep up with the mowing. I've okayed Friday work schedule for some of the mowers to try to catch up. We're getting further and further behind, it seems like. We're still working on a lot of the road damage in the southwest section of those heavy rains that were down there 3 weeks ago. There's a lot of damage down there. We are patching on West Fork, and then we're gonna move to Mennonite for the asphalt patching. Building maintenance, we're doing preventive fogging. We've done the courthouse and we did community corrections this last weekend. We're just going around the fogging in a preventive way. Having a lot of plumbing issues at the law enforcement center. We are dealing with roof leaks at the fairgrounds and at EMS. We're trying to patch EMS the best we can, since we don't know how long it'll be there or what the status is there for sure. And how about this? Huh? How about that? That's the building maintenance guys for you. Pretty good, huh?
It's not
Break your arm.
No, that's that.
Too bad the public can't see that.
Noxious weed, working on state contracts right now. They are behind the curve. This should have been done a while ago. They've been authorized to work Fridays too to try to catch up. State contracts should have been over and done with already, but they're working on it. There was the meeting with the LED lighting at the LEC. I kind of touched on last meeting before. We have a company that said they can go in and replace all the LEDs at the law enforcement center free of charge. They would do all the upkeep of the LEDs. And they would do an energy audit beforehand. They want 75% of what we save, and we would keep 25% of what we'd save for 15 years. There's a lot of moving parts. This is all I know so far. But anyway, it's kind of interesting. The sheriff's office is pretty, I guess you'd say, agreeable to it. They were very excited about that. If they could actually save enough for them to invest that kind of manpower and equipment into a project like that. So a lot of moving parts. I'll keep everybody in the loop on that. You remember Scott Strom from 360 Engineering? He thinks that there's grants and money to be had for the LEC HVAC, some other things like that. He has started his own company called Iconergy. Him and a couple other guys from 360 started their own company. They're out beating up business, but I have a meeting with him next Wednesday. He just wants to go through the LEC and see if there's free money out there that we can get a hold of. Lawful free money. So, we're getting Wildwood. We get 5 to 8 people daily. On the weekends, we get 15 to 20 a day. Those are just rough estimates. We've had a lot of positive feedback on Wildwood. There's still a lot to do out there. It's kind of my world in a nutshell. No questions. It's a great world.
Just observation, I've mowed a few of your ditches for you along the Mennonite, just so you know.
Did you?
Yeah. Between Rob and I, we probably got 7 miles covered for you.
Turn in your request for that.
Now, he wants it, we mow at convenience and he wants it all the time, so it's a freebie.
Did you have a permit to do that?
No.
Ask for forgiveness.
Are you using totally rotary mowers on those weeds?
Yeah.
Wouldn't a sickle mower be a whole lot faster?
Sickle mower's faster, but it doesn't look as good because you have, if the weeds are that tall, then you have that tall weed laying on
Or windrow.
I've thought about sickle mowers and we've used sickle mowers in the past on the back slopes and things like that. But if you lay down tall weeds right next to the road, people don't like the way it looks.
Well, it smothers out when you got underneath it too.
Sickle's a good fast way to do it, but it just doesn't look as good unless you.
Rocks don't work good in sickle mower.
Rocks don't look good.
That's true.
Unless you like replacing sickles. But,
Rotary mowers don't like
unless
to
you want to
do it.
go buy a sickle mower.
Plastic bottles, I don't know how, there's, and what else?
Well, not so much the plastic bottles as the rubber tires.
That was my next comment, were tires.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Keep up the good work.
I've seen him mowing, Rocky's out mowing all the time.
Gotta quit driving around my house.
So do you ever permit for your ditches?
I'm working on it.
Oh, okay, okay. Board governance.
Is Colleen coming today?
She is working with the school nurses today on in-service, and was not certain whether or not she'd be able to make it up here today.
Obviously.
So
And assume she's been working on grants like crazy as well.
that is correct. That is correct. I know that she does have one that is pretty certain that will come in, although we have not received absolute confirmation yet. It's approximately $360,000.
That's a big one, yeah.
So I think that's a one-time grant, and I know that she is looking at a couple of others as well.
Okay. Board governance is on the agenda. We usually look to Lon for that.
Well, the one point I would make to the governance, outside of our regular reports, is that, we're entering that season, if you will, for legislative policies. And we had our first meeting as a KAC Legislative Policy Group last Friday, and we'll have our follow-up on the 11th of September. But, sometime yet this fall, we'll need to decide whether or not we adopt, like we have in the past, KAC and NACO and KLPG and Chamber and that kind of thing. But that process has started, and I'll bring more of that to you September 11th. And then lastly, to that, specific to the KAC, it's going to be an approval process that's never been done before, because the annual conference is no longer going to be face-to-face. It's going to be Zoom things. And so the approval of the legislative policy for KAC will be done differently this year than it ever has before. So that process has started for our state organization.
Okay, thank you. Further? Okay, Robert.
Yes, sir. Just a few things. You do have a public hearing, if you recall, next Monday. On that, we do have sewer district number 3 budget, and we will get you a copy of that. Sewer district 3, as you may recall, continually has a negative fund balance at the end of the year. The budget that I propose, in essence, will hopefully resolve some of that issue, but it is a mill levy increase on that, for them. Now, the only reason why I did that was for you to be able to discuss it during your budgeting process on how you want to resolve that negative fund balance at year end. You have a couple of options. One of them is that increased mill levy for that sewer district. And the reason why I put that in there, once again, because during the hearing, you can decrease it, you can't increase it. So I put it up there to the level that I thought would help resolve that. The other thing is that you consciously then make a transfer into that sewer district from another fund to resolve that fund balance. Either way, something formally should be done to resolve the negative fund balance at year end. It is a notation on your annual audit. That's one of the things that we're wanting to clean up as we go through the process here. So that's one thing for your consideration. We'll send out that copy of that if we haven't already. Update on Spark grant. We did file the report on Friday, late Friday. And in speaking with the auditors, we'll send them those reports as we make them, so that they can prepare and be better prepared for the audit coming up next year. So we'll send those reports to them as well. In that, it gives you, in essence, an accounting of your beginning fund balance for that grant, what you've spent, and then your ending fund balance, as well as a detail on what you spent. So they'll have that information up front. Hopefully it'll make their work a little bit easier as it relates to that grant. Next thing is, we do have a meeting on the 24th for the public hearing, and I believe that is probably the only point of business for that day, I believe.
Right now, yes.
Nothing on the 31st, and then traditionally, from what I understand, then we go into what's Labor Day, the holiday. Do you, just for clarification for me, do you meet that week, or do you go the next week? I'm just wanting to get a clarification on that.
Generally meet on the Tuesday right after.
Do you? Okay.
Right?
Yes.
You're gonna be gone, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna be here.
And I will be gone on the 8th. Just quick digression, I do plan to be here next Monday. I didn't know for sure if I was gonna be able to, but we're coming back Sunday. And, but the 8th, I will be out of town.
So I don't know, what, if we move that meeting to the 14th, would that change your billing? That would change something, remember we talked about this in years past.
So it would be fine. We would just send out bills 6 days late. I think that's the only thing.
So what is your pleasure on that?
I won't be here on the 14th. I can be here on the 8th.
Dave, on the 8th?
I'm available 24/7.
Well, if we have a short agenda and main thing is the bills, we could have a 3-man commission and that's a majority. We can take care of that billing thing and
Okay.
let's just
On
plan on
Tuesday,
Tuesday the 8th. Kind of maybe a light agenda then, since we're missing a lot of the commissioners, just enough to do the basics.
Okay,
And then we'll meet again then on the 21st normally, right?
correct.
Okay.
I have a question for Robert, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. That sewer district, we had a discussion some months back about the one house that's on 2 lots, and does it pay for 2 sewer fees or 1? Did that ever get resolved, or we're gonna take a look and maybe have to redo the resolution?
I think you'll have to redo the resolution, as I recall. I believe you may have discussed that perhaps in February, maybe?
No, last year and, yeah.
Right.
Was this the time to address that or not?
So we will be billing by parcel this year, like we did last year and what your preference is. I believe that resolution, I don't know if the rest of it has to be redone, but it's just an addendum on the resolution that specifies how to bill.
How the assessment.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the original recommendation from prior legal counsel was to just update that addendum, but I don't know how appropriate that is. It's a very old resolution, so it may warrant being looked at.
Well, just,
But we will bill by parcel, so.
Did we raise the mill levy on this district a couple of years ago, or?
You did in the general fund 19. There was not a mill levy in 20 in the general fund, and then you do have your debt service fund. And you did levy a mill levy for the current year in the debt service fund.
Where have we transferred the money out of to make this fund whole? Out of the general fund?
Yes, you'll end up transferring it out of the general fund, yeah. Just to make it whole.
So sewer district 3 has been subsidized by the general.
It has all along, it's just not been formalized. It has in terms of cash, but by way of the fund balance at the end of the year, unless you either, well, really the only alternative is just to formalize the transferring of revenue from one fund to the next to balance that out.
Mr. Chairman, I have 2 questions on the district. When we say, I want to make sure that I'm clear on our language when we say by parcel, and I'll use mine as an example, parcel is the house and the lot that a house can never be built on. That's one parcel.
In your case, your parcel contains 2 lots.
Right. So not by, so
We're not
I'm just
going
trying
by
to distinguish
lots.
the language here. So not by lots, but by parcel. Parcel
which is how it's
could
written.
be more than one lot.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I would make sure that I'm clear on the language because I know I'm going to get asked that question.
And that was the board's direction
Well,
at
no,
some point
that's the way
last
I
year,
understood
so.
it, but I wasn't sure how we were using the word parcel, and I wanted to make sure that was very clear.
Yes.
Second question is, and I don't know, maybe it's as much for John as anybody, but is this deficit being caused by the maintenance of the pumps and so forth? What's created the deficit? And I know I'm asking before your time with us, so if you need to defer, that's great. But what's creating the deficit that we're covering? I'm unclear on that. Is it the annual maintenance that we have in the system, or?
I'll probably look to John on that, because I think it's probably a combination of a few things, or at least a couple of things.
Because I'm unclear on that as well. Because I'm not arguing the fact that there is a deficit, it's been subsidized, but I just don't know what's created that.
I am aware that it does have a high rate of delinquencies on payments.
So is that a large part of it, is the delinquencies?
I thought most of the deficit was from the bond payment, the debt service.
Well, it is, but
And
you have an approximate operating cost of somewhere around $80,000 a year for that. Actually, it's probably closer to $200,000 a year. Your debt service is approximately $45,000 a year. I do not recall right off the bat what you try to make. It seems like you're trying to maintain about a 5 mil limit on that. It's just not sufficient to pay those, both the operating and the debt service. So in all, you probably have a total expenditure on an annual basis between the two funds of approximately $150,000. I do not recall, but we're looking into the delinquency ratio on the fee structure of it. If I remember correctly, the fees that are billed on an annual basis, I believe, is approximately $90,000. I think on average, over the past 3 years, you've been averaging somewhere around a collection of somewhere around 25,000, 27,000.
Out of how much?
Approximately 90,000, I believe, is what you're.
Collections been about 20?
On those user fees, and that would be through the September 30th deadline. At that point, they roll over onto the tax bill
As specials.
as specials, and then some of them get picked up there, but I think that there's still a lot that are
But it's that high, about 70,000 difference.
Yes, from.
Really? I mean, I knew there were delinquencies, I didn't realize it was that much.
And we can pull those numbers, we will pull those numbers together for you to consider during the budget process.
Yeah,
Because
we
there's
need
a.
that.
I
there's
think
a
that's
lot
what
of
Commissioner Jones is asking, how far into the weeds do we get on this particular issue, and I think we need to deal with it.
Yeah,
Well-
I think so too.
And I don't mean to interrupt here, but the parcel that Dory's talking about doesn't quite cover everything that was in question. There was for example, a pump house sitting on one lot that's paying sewer rent. There'll never be a house on where the pump house, well house is. There's a lake that'll never be, or a pond or a hole in the ground out there where they'll never have a.
sorry, those have been exempted from user fees.
Yeah.
for the
Okay,
most part.
that was what I was asking.
The what?
I don't think the pump house has not been exempt. But the property we own and our lift station property.
Well, the reason I brought it up was back months ago, we were gonna discuss that and see if the resolution needed to be updated and so on. And I was just asking if that ever happened, and it's not.
We're just waiting on updating the resolution. We have not updated the resolution. The consensus from commission, I understood, was to bill by parcel like we have been.
And that
annually like
that
we
was
have.
our understanding, that was Utes and my understanding.
Well, John, I guess that's the information that you need to be ready with when we discuss this on all aspects of what we've talked about in the past and options as our administrator has presented. How do we break this thing even in the future, and where do we go?
But if we need an addendum to the resolution, can we ask our county councilor to draft that? Is that appropriate?
I know that John was working on that, so I don't know where that's at. I know that we had discussed it with Tom at one point.
Okay, there's one thing that you need to be considering, because that has a formal debt on it from who's covering that, the Is that one of those 40-year bonds?
Yes,
Yes.
it is. That's 40-year bond.
Recall when you issued that, you had an assessment rule on that, correct?
Mhm.
That had to go through a formal hearing under,
Right.
actually it's that KSA 19-27 AO 1 through 16 statutes for assessment of sewers and so forth. And so what you'll need to, formally what you'll need to do is hold another, propose your resolution on reassessing it, because that's what you're going through. You're making an adjustment to your assessment rule. So you have to have a hearing to make sure that everybody is noticed up, that instead of having, and I don't know how many you have on it, let's say you have 320 on that based upon lots, and because you're wanting to go to parcels, maybe it ends up being 300.
So there,
Still, remember the assessment is based upon your debt. So you're going to increase some of those assessments down. So there's a formal process that you'll need to go through to do that. So it's not just an easy resolution.
The other piece of that though, Robert, and this all happened before your arrival, is we were being assessed by parcel up until a year or two ago. And so I don't know if it's in the language. That's why I'm trying to clarify whether it did say by lot, or, you know, I'd have to go back and look at that. But then a year or two, was this our second year that we had questioned about that? But anyhow, then we got two bills instead of just one that we've been getting for whenever that sewer was put in, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, yeah, something like that. So we were being billed by parcel level up until a year or two ago. And I don't know if it's because of the language in that initial resolution or not.
The initial resolution does state per lot, and when it was brought before the commission at prior times, they said you voted by lot, you will pay by lot.
Yep.
However, the prior clerk's office decided to, or were instructed to, I don't know, but they billed by parcel. I did that my first year. The second year, John said, hey, you know, we're supposed to be doing this by lot, and so we changed it to lot and raised it.
But we didn't vote by lot either. We voted by parcel, because we only had one vote, but we have two lots. So we didn't vote by lot. We voted by parcel. So that's where it all really gets complicated.
When you said you voted, was it the landowners? Okay. Well, the guiding document is going to be your bond document.
I get that. I'm
Okay.
just adding this into the
Okay.
conversation. I'm not refuting it, anything, but
Okay.
But we've been billed by parcel, we've been voted by parcel, but then we found that the language may have been different than that.
Okay.
And then we made the decision that it should be by parcel because Mike Hughes and I were the two that were in here visiting about that. We both have those extra lots that never will be built on because they've been incorporated into one lot, if you will. But our parcel says that we each have two lots. So that's where this conversation came in as far as billing by parcel. I very much respect and understand what you're saying. But all along until it was found that maybe the previous clerk wasn't doing it correctly, we, for 15 years or whenever that sewer was put in, we've been doing everything by parcel, voting, paying, so forth, on the bond issue.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and review that document, get clarification, then we'll figure out the correct path in terms of how to correct that if it's the wish of the board to go to a parcel payment process as opposed to a lot.
interesting little side note, Mr. Towns, who developed that whole area and who has a home there, is paying for a sewer that he does not use for his own home because it's on a septic tank. So I don't know how many of those you have around.
Well,
There's quite a few of
he's
them.
also the owner of a water system that he's not hooked to and doesn't, and that's created a whole problem with KCC and KDHE, so.
Anyways, it needs to be probably ironed out someday.
Okay, well,
Well, I don't know how far we'll get on the next meeting during the budget process, but we need to start this process of this whole
yeah,
sewer
I
district
don't
number 3.
think this issue will have a bearing on that budget
Okay.
process. You'll just need to come to grips with how you want to try and right that ship.
Yeah, and knowing what's causing the problem is where I'm coming from.
Okay, very good.
Are the operating costs significant? Well, back to what Lon asked, are the costs different in each district or what's? Just by the amount of usage or?
They're all, the way they're billed, they're all separate, different. Sewer District 1, we billed $27.05 a month residential rate, monthly bills that comes out of the Public Works Office. Sewer District 2 is assessed a mill levy. I think they're a little over right at 5 mils, a little over 5 mils for a sewer district. That becomes our maintenance fees. SD1 and SD2, their operation and maintenance costs. The bonds were built into those costs in those buildings. So now that those off, all that they're paying for is maintenance and operation. SD3 we had debt retirement budget and operating maintenance budget. The operation and maintenance budget is the one I figured every year. The other one is based off of the debt retirement schedule. SD3 is billed annually. And when they didn't pay annually, it would roll over right onto their tax roll. The $312 is somewhere around 26 something a month. To get close, I think 335 about is where the budget that I made would be $335 a year, and that's $27.90 a month if you went monthly. So actually SD3 is paying a little less than SD1 on a residential rate, but they're all billed separately, and the billing comes from Dory's office on SD3 and not Public Works.
John, will you help me? Maybe it's a public question as well. When you're taxing that district, is it everybody who's on the sewer district, or is it everybody who potentially could be on it as well? Let's pick on sewer district number 2, Southwind. Everybody knows Southwind. Is everybody taxed under that mill levy, or just those that are using the system?
I believe it's a district.
Whether you use it or not.
Whether you use it or not. Okay, maybe that helps me, and maybe as well as the public.
Dr. Clifford's house probably shouldn't be on the sewer district tax, the
Tax roll.
for that. Yeah.
Right.
He
Okay,
should
thank
have
you.
one for SD3.
But it goes to availability of service, so you, if it's there.
And that's covered. I pulled that statute up for your screen there. As you can see, it's screen has under 27A03 to be subsection D is the method of assessment that will clearly identify within your bond document how it was proposed, and that's the mechanism that we need to fix.
Okay.
Right.
It'd be another interesting discussion.
Learning all kinds of things this year.
Anything else for John on the sewer district 3 before we move on?
Please no.
Please don't. All right.
Not for John so much as for Robert, but I know another piece of the discussion has been some of the reasons that these go into delinquency is because people get to the end of the year and they don't have $312 or $330. I know Mike and I would not have a problem if it's $350 for our parcel. But we have people who say they can't do that, instead of putting $20 away every month and being ready to pay that bill. So the other piece that's come into question is whether or not those bills can be done monthly, so that they're paying $25 a month instead of 300, or do we have the option, or can we have the option? So I just wanted, for Robert's benefit, that's been the other piece of this discussion, is with regard to the frequency of payment.
You do, as a county, have that option. We had districts that, just like this one, paid once a year, and we also had districts that paid on a monthly basis.
Which, in our case, we don't want the once a year thing to go, personally, we don't want that to go away, because that's how we pay all our bills that we can. But on the other hand, if it's gonna help the delinquency thing, to have that as an option for payment, but I don't know what that does to our administrative costs and so forth and so on. So just know that's another piece of this discussion that we've had briefly, so.
Robert, anything else for us?
No, sir.
All right, let's go to the commission reports then. We'll start with Lon this time.
Well, the only other one, because I was gonna ask about meetings and so forth, the only other one that I have, and I sent information to Robert the other day, is the 60 million, and Bill had asked about this at the last meeting, the 60 million that's being allocated for broadband expansion. They had a call, and our lobbyist, I can't think of the name of it, just a second. Federico Group. The Federico Group monitored this call the other day and sent out 4 or 5 pages of information, and there's 2 grants. There's going to be a connectivity emergency response grant, and there's going to be a partnership adoption grant. And the goals are going to be for telehealth, telemedicine, access to rural and underserved areas, distance learning, 5G investment, and so forth. And there's a grant process, and I passed that on to Robert, but you have to go through the grant process to be able to access any of this. And earlier, Robert and I were talking about, it'd be nice to try to get some of that money for Finney County, but really we need to get it for the region, not just for Finney County, but there's no time to put together a regional request. So it's really a tough thing, and I don't know where we're going to stand. But the 60 million that Bill asked about last week is already divvied out through grant requests. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Dave?
Well, I'm gonna, not bother you very long, I'm gonna share some good news. Find it here right quick. I'll do it from memory. Sherry, excuse me, a frog in the throat. Sherry Campbell, the director of the senior center, who suffered an aneurysm and had surgery and has been out of action, today can, by doctor's permission, return for part-time work, an hour and a half a day. It's gonna be a while kind of coming back to full-time work, but Hillary's covering for her and has done a great job. The fact that Sherry's back, though, is encouraging good news. The meetings tonight is also a library board meeting at 5 o'clock if anybody's interested. And I've had a whole series of phone calls regarding everything from board appointments to taxes, and none of them are rise to the level of a report other than Leonard Hitz is one of our appointees to the Planning Commission. His term's about to expire, and he indicated a willingness to serve some more if we're desiring that. So I suggested to him to have Carol send over a note to somebody, either Robert or Dory, stating when his term actually ends and that he's willing to serve again. So that'll be forthcoming. One final phone call. I had a call from a former county commissioner who left here a few years ago, and he said that our newspaper article about keeping the mill levy flat is misleading, in fact inaccurate, because last year funded the Extension Council. This year we're not. So whatever the Extension Council goes up on the 24th, we need to take that away from the budget in order to keep it flat. So that's your former county commissioner. Anyway, that's it.
I don't have anything.
Larry?
I had a few phone calls on the roads and they just needed somebody to bid on, so that's fine.
That happens a lot. Only meeting I've had since the last meeting is the Fair Board. They did appoint 2 new Fair Board members, which was encouraging. Seems like a couple of these got people from the old extension board are willing to move over into the Fair Board, which is good. So we're progressing. We might actually have a goal of 10 Fair Board members, and I think we're at 7 right now. So we're gaining, which is good. And we've had another great planning development. Those folks are busy. They're calling us meetings 3 times a month now instead of once. So a lot of projects have been coming down the pike, and there's expansion in the community. That's it for me. Anything else to be brought in front of the commission?
Quick question for Robert. Our COVID numbers keep coming down as the
Actually, Colleen just texted me and says she's on her way. If you wanted to hold on just a brief moment, she can provide you a brief update if you want.
You in a hurry, guys?
Nope.
Okay.
One thing, Trista's here, and I know that you guys had questions last week about tax revenues.
She sent it.
She sent out a nice
Did you
note.
have any questions on those?
It's good information to have. Thank you.
Can you raise the collections a little more?
I wish they could, but no, that's not a thing. I did want to bring the transient gas tax to your attention. We do have one more distribution that we will receive this year for the transient gas tax, so that is significantly down. Thank goodness the sales tax is holding pretty steady, but that transient gas tax, I mean, we expected to die, but it's down significantly.
Are they going to be able to hit their 800,000 at this projection?
I'm gonna guess probably not.
Not bad. That's what I want.
And I think they're actually at 770 this year.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think they will. They're having their meeting this week. I won't be attending it, but their monthly board meeting this week, and Roxanne will give more information then.
But their expenses should also have gone down a bit because they're not advertising.
That is true, but the convention visitor stepped up big time in the fair because they had funds available. They really
Yeah, so that
helped it
last
fair.
distribution will happen in October, so I'll be able to give you a better idea once we get closer to that, so.
Yeah, it's gonna be down substantially.
I believe that it's a scheduled transfer from there into economic dev incentives.
Yes, we do, and so that'll be something to consider as well. We had budgeted an $80,000 transfer from the transient gas tax to economic development incentives. So that'll be something to be thinking about as we get that last distribution. I don't anticipate, the CVB even getting their budget amount this year, so just something to think about.
Doug, while you're sitting there, any update? You got your proposal turned in, or for anything you want to comment on that one? Is it everything's flowing?
We've gotten a lot of questions about the RFP, so that's good news. I believe we'll have an adequate amount of proposals. So I'm excited for it. I think it'll be a good thing.
Okay.
I would just add, and I've communicated with Doug and Robert, so this is not anything that will catch them off guard, but the question that has been raised to me by 2 vendors who are interested in this project is the concern about public competing with private in with regard to fiber. So I think we always need to be conscious of that, be aware of that. I think we're okay, because we've got an RFP and so forth, but that question has been raised twice by vendors, and is the county competing with the private sector and so forth, so.
Okay. I see Colleen stepped in the room. Colleen, if you catch your breath.
Just ran up the stairs, just like, oh. Whew, all right, so just a quick update on our numbers. So August 3rd through August 7th, we tested 170 people, which this was down 22 from the previous week. 25 of those tested positive, so it gave us a 15% positivity rate. That's down from the 22% the previous week. 6 of those tests are still pending, so this afternoon I'll be working to look at what's going on with those 6 tests that are still coming out in that time period, because we should have results. Then last week, August 10th to the 14th, we tested 112, so down 58 from the previous week. Majority are still pending, so I don't have a positivity rate for that week. And we currently have 2 hospitalizations. So hospitalizations obviously are pretty low right now. So that's the sum of what I have data metric-wise of what's going on.
And we had one death, right?
1 additional death.
Can you comment any on that? Was that an old, young, whatever?
A gentleman in his 80s,
With underlying
medical conditions. Yes.
So 9 of the 11 have had underlying health concerns. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pose a question. Midwest Health owns Homestead Assisted Living and the Ranch House. Midwest Health is, the main office is in Topeka, and I don't believe they understand Finney County.
Okay.
Because Kearney County is allowing some visitation at their nursing home. Garden Valley is allowing some limited visitation at its nursing home. Midwest Health will not allow visitation. As a matter of fact, they've gone from screened window visits to closed window visits. And they list several things that are along the CMS guidelines and so forth. One is that they won't allow any visitation until they're fully staffed. They continue to tell us at the ranch house that they're fully staffed. They will not allow visitation until the hospital beds are available. The hospital beds are available in Finney County. A third one is they will not allow visitation until the positives show some decline or maybe even disappear. And there's a couple of other criteria that they're looking at. Well, we meet most all that criteria, except they keep looking at the positives. They don't look at the hospitalizations. And when I say they, Midwest Health, they're not looking at some of that other criteria. So all of that preface, when do we quit testing so that these organizations outside of Finney County can understand that we're doing okay? Maybe not great, maybe we need to do better. I get that, I get all of that. But we've got people dying in these nursing homes for reasons other than COVID, loneliness, lack of connectivity with relatives. We've got relatives that are needing mental health help because they're stressed and not able to see their loved ones. So all of that being said, and I know you can't control Midwest Health, I respect that and understand that, and we're trying to communicate with them on our relative that's at the ranch house. But when do we quit testing? Because that seems to be the driver for companies that are housed outside of this area. Because the hospital beds are there, the staffing is there. I mean, we've taken away some of those other excuses for allowing visitations.
So what I'll say is, obviously, just because there is just a specific lower concern, perhaps now, or that determination could be made that it's a lower concern now, doesn't mean that it's going to consistently stay low. as coronavirus is a novel virus, we don't know enough about it to make those types of determinations. The directive from KDHE is that we are going to continue testing and continue doing contact tracing and disease investigations for the foreseeable future. I don't know what that looks like in the long run. I know that this is obviously the first time that we've had a pandemic. This is the first time in our lifetime, right, that we're seeing pandemics, that we're seeing a novel virus. So gathering enough data to truly understand the virus, the way that it's spread, the way that it's transmitted, who's at risk, developing a vaccine if that will work, knowing if there's new strains that are developing from coronavirus, this particular SARS-2, if there's new strains that are developing. So not knowing the full impact on our community, the full impact on our nation, on the world, public health officials would want to know a more comprehensive understanding before we just stop testing, type of a thing. So that's kind of the perspective of, we're still in a very huge information gathering stage. Obviously since March, when it first hit here, we've had leaps and bounds in public health since then of what we understand, what we can do, how we can restrict transmission, what precautions will help, as well as just other studies that have done. It's a whole different world, right, that we're living in, and we've gained so much from that.
And I respect what you just said and about data and gathering data. I guess what part of the reason for my question is, how do we convince the out-of-county owners of nursing homes that today we're doing okay? Because the ones that are owned by local entities in Kearney County and here locally seem to understand that and are allowing relatives to visit. Very limited. I don't want to make it sound like they've opened the doors, but we are struggling to even get Midwest Health to understand that you can be innovative about having a designated room or allowing the person to come outside, or some of these things that the others are doing. So I guess what I'm searching for is there any way that we as a county can help educate those out-of-county owners that, gosh, it's already being done, and we're trying individually, but we're not having any success.
So saying these nursing homes have had great success with these type of precautions in place to allow visitation.
Right.
Sure.
Right. So I guess that, and I very much respect, we're continuing to gather data. It's something that we've never had before. I get all of that. But people who don't live here don't understand it. And we've got corporate offices. I think we've got a bank corporate office from out of here that doesn't understand it either, based on my knowledge about the bank, not being open and so forth.
And some of it may be liability concerns, right? They don't want to be the ones that open the doors and allow an outbreak within their facility, which that could be devastating for a facility. So those are things that we have worked very hard to give the best recommendations to avoid those types of situations.
And then lastly, I will say we've talked locally, statewide, and company-wide. And the state puts it off on the company puts it off on the federal's putting it off. Nobody is taking accountability, period. And I'm not talking specifically with regard to nursing homes. I'm not talking about any other things, just nursing homes. And we're killing the people in those nursing homes.
Right. I mean, that's obviously an at-risk population that everyone wants to protect for sure. So.
We're wondering, what are we protecting them from?
Sure.
Average age of death is 80, and I'm talking about somebody who's 95 who's already outlived average age of death by 15 years. So what are we protecting them from is our question we ask every day.
Sure.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman, but I'm pretty passionate.
And you're going to start all over today? Never mind, go ahead.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Last time you stood before us, I asked about seeing on the news the asymptomatic 65-year-old or older getting a test in some counties. You said you're gonna check with KDHE. Have you learned anything about that?
I have not, but we have made that determination of testing those who are at risk, high risk, if they've had a potential exposure. So that is something that we would do. They just need to call the health department.
So I could come and see you.
If you believe that you have been at risk, yes.
No. I was asking for a friend.
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Anything further for Colleen? Thank you for rushing down there very much.
Yep, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence. I know I got a little more passionate than that.
I'm quite sure it's a very frustrating experience for you and your family. Anything else from the commission? Hearing nothing, adjourned.
Till September 8th. No, till 25th.